Good afternoon, Judge Makgoka.
Good afternoon, Chief Justice and esteemed commissioners.
Are you well?
I'm well, yourself, Chief Justice. Thank you.
I'm very well, thank you. What was your first degree? Your first degree?
I have only one degree, Chief Justice, BProc.
BProc.
Yes.
And for how many years did you practice law before your elevation to the bench?
About 15 years.
15 years. And if you add up your acting stints, for how long did you act as a High Court judge? More or less, before your permanent appointment.
I acted almost 2 years except for a term before I was elevated.
Yes. Was it a continuous acting stint or were there breaks in between?
It was a continuous stint except one term.
Yes. And when then were you permanently appointed to the High Court?
I was appointed in August 2009, Chief Justice.
And in your own words, more or less, how many years has it been since your appointment to that court?
That would be about 8 years, Chief Justice.
8 years. Now, tell us about your acting stint at the Supreme Court of Appeal. For how long was it?
So far, I've acted for 4 terms. I did 2 terms in 2016, 1 term in 2017, and I've just done a term now in 2018.
So it's 4 terms all in all.
Yes.
That translates to how many months, more or less?
Well, a term is a long term in the Supreme Court of Appeal is a month and a half, and a short term is a month. So it's, my mathematics is bad, but
Sure. All right. Now, how did you find the environment at the Supreme Court of Appeal upon arrival and during your stay? Was it welcoming? Was it conducive to one's acclimatization to that environment? Or were there challenges? And if so, what were the challenges? But those that you are comfortable to express. I say that because I know some things are better dealt with internally.
yes.
There are the so-called dirty linens that do not necessarily have to be flown open for everybody to see. They are more effectively addressed internally. So those that can be said.
Thanks, Chief Justice. The Supreme Court of Appeal is different from where I had sat all along as a judge of the High Court. My experience is complex in the sense that on one hand, I found some measure of empowerment and welcoming, but at the same time, there was some coldness.
Let me just stop there. Where did the warmth and the welcoming come from? Which hand is that? And which hand was cold? In simple and easy to understand
Well,
terms.
there were colleagues who went out of their way to make sure that I feel welcome. But there are certain colleagues which made you feel like you're not really welcome here.
Is it a correct statement to say that that attitude had nothing to do with race.
Chief Justice, to some extent, you are correct. Sometimes it has to do with intellectual superiority, I would imagine.
Actual or assumed?
Assumed, in most instances assumed.
And in other respects?
In other respects, there are other dynamics also. I mean, apart from race is a real factor in the Supreme Court of Appeal. But there are other dynamics. Yeah, some of them I might not need to talk about at this forum, yes.
Yes. So that I assume that's the dirty linen part.
Yeah.
Are they of such a nature that you would share with the head of the court, and if I, out of interest, want to know from you in private, you would share them with me? And I raise the question because there are so many assumptions. One, that even where circumstances cry out for my intervention, I am indifferent. I don't intervene. When in fact people are not forthcoming with information. I often get shocked, like I was during the interview of President Maya, about elements of racism and prejudice at the Supreme Court of Appeal. They had never before been brought to my attention. So would you be keen, broadly speaking, to share some of these internal issues on the assumption that I'm part of the internal?
Is the Chief Justice inviting me to share them at this forum?
No. Would you be willing at some stage,
Certainly,
those
Chief
that you are
Justice.
able to share?
Certainly, Chief Justice, I would.
Now, how then would you fit in when the situation is as challenging as it seems to be, to the point where Igor says that you were somewhat emotionally moved at some point when you had to respond? How then would you fit into that environment? What would make it possible for you to soldier on, notwithstanding the unwelcoming challenges or attitudes displayed by one of the arms,
Yes.
for want of a better expression?
Thanks, Chief Justice. One has to be mentally strong about these things. Nothing has happened while I acted there that I could not deal with. But secondly, the appointment of Justice Mai as the president of that court has heralded a new era. She's firm, she's fair, and I think these challenges, which she's well aware of, she will be able to deal with.
Yes. Now, in your own words, how ready are you for a role as the permanent judge of the Supreme Court of Appeal should you be appointed? Very briefly, in your own words, the critical issues that you believe need to be highlighted before President Maya even puts questions to you.
Chief Justice, I would say I feel ready to make a contribution to the Supreme Court of Appeal. My being a judge in Pretoria, I think, has prepared me eminently for that court. Pretoria High Court should arguably be the busiest court in the country, and for my 8 years in Pretoria, I have dealt with a near full spectrum of matters that in most instances end up in the Supreme Court of Appeal. There are matters that, in terms of the law, only Pretoria can deal with as a court of first instance. For example, patent matters. In terms of Section 8 of the Patents Act, the Commissioner of Patents is a judge designated as such in Pretoria. And I've been privileged to preside in some of those matters. So I feel eminently prepared for the contribution there, Chief Justice.
President Maya.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Justice Makgoka.
Good afternoon, President.
Just quick clarification. I'm worried that our employer, the taxpayer, may think that we spend half the year loafing around instead of working. The actual court term, when the court is in session and hears appeals, maybe the 6 weeks and the 4 weeks here and there. But throughout the rest of the year, we are working,
Yes.
reading the high volumes of
Oh, yes.
records and dealing with petitions. You forgot to mention that.
Yes, thanks, President Maya.
I'm just a bit worried that you have not informed me that you were experiencing problems in the court. And I know that you've said nothing has happened to you that you did not feel you could handle yourself. But it does not help the institution if people experience things in their own small corners and they deal with them there and they continue to fester and affect other people. So I ask you, as you know, I keep an open door policy. You're still going to be with us for another term, next term.
Yes.
If any incident occurs, then please do inform me. Have you made use of the induction committee, which I created to specifically look after acting judges and address their challenges and needs in the court?
Well, I became aware of it this last term. I was not invited, apparently because I had acted before. Yes, but I would use that opportunity and that platform, President.
I'm sorry you're not informed. Have you had any difficulty at all writing judgments, the SCA style as it is called?
No, President Maya, I've not experienced any problems.
And you have been able to produce your judgments promptly?
Yes.
If I may just mention that I have heard very good comments about your writing skills from senior colleagues.
Thanks.
Has the fact that you only have one law degree ever hindered you in the course of your judicial functions?
No, that has never been a hindrance at all.
Other than the concerns which you've already raised with the Chief Justice, is there anything else that you think should be improved in the court?
One thing that struck me when I arrived there is that the senior judges are in one wing, and the junior judges and acting judges would be in one wing. I had thought there should be sort of a crossbreed of senior judges and acting judges and junior judges so that that interaction can take place much more efficiently. But I think it's one of those things that's a matter of tradition. It has been like that for some time. But that just struck me that the senior judges decide, junior judges decide.
Point taken, Judge Makgoka. Anything else?
No.
I may just mention that, though, as you would have noticed, senior judges all fled to the new wing because it has new chambers
Yes.
with bathrooms, which the rest of the building does not have. So that may be the reason for
Yes.
this uneven allocation of chambers. I'm going to ask you, my final question, I'm going to ask you an unfair question which I put to Judge Govan. As you know, there are 3 vacancies and there are 4 women candidates. The SCA is notorious for its low representativity in terms of gender. Now, if at least 3 of the women candidates are found to qualify for appointment to that court, what should we do? What would you advise us to do?
Yeah. President Maya, it's true. There is an acute shortage of women judges in the Supreme Court of Appeal, in particular African women. And if I have to step back for an African woman to be appointed, I would be prepared.
Thank you, Judge Makgoka.
Thank you.
Commissioner Msomi?
Thanks, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon.
Looking at your profile, it's quite an impressive profile. I see you acted as the Justice of the Lesotho High Court. It was their constitutional court. Are there any lessons that the South African Constitutional Court could learn from the Constitutional Court in Lesotho?
Well, it is called the Constitutional Division of the High Court. My acting stint there was not long enough to make a useful comparison. We went there on one matter that involved the head of court in Lesotho. So I wouldn't venture to make that comparison.
That's a fair answer. The second question that I wanted to pose, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pose it eloquently as I would like to. If you look at the Supreme Court of Appeal, I think it's regarded very much as a court of law. And there seems to be a perception that it is resisting to go beyond developing common law. And the most often cited case is that Vodacom case, commonly known as Please Call Me case. What's your assessment of the Supreme Court of Appeal? Are we able to balance issues of equity and strictly issues of law? Thank you. That's my last question.
Thank you. I think, Commissioner Msomi, that observation is correct. And it is supported by a number of cases that have gone from the Supreme Court of Appeal to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court took a totally different view. For example, the Ermelo case, you remember that the Supreme Court of Appeal decided it on a particular basis. And the first remark by the Constitutional Court was, this is about Section 28 of the Constitution, which the Supreme Court of Appeal had not dealt with.
Justice, it's a follow-up question, sorry. Finally, in your entire career, have you written any judgment that has developed common law for the benefit of the Commission?
No. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Norman?
Chief Justice, good afternoon, Judge Makgoka.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Sorry, my question really relates to one dissenting judgment that you wrote in the Ndaba versus Ndaba matter. Well, the question that I have, but also I just want to state that your dissenting judgment there actually gives insight into your personality and your strength as a judge of appeal, because you are differing from very senior colleagues in that matter. But what I want to understand is, once you reach a point where you write a dissenting judgment, is the environment at the SCA such that even if you differ with your senior colleagues, you still feel comfortable at the end of the day and you feel that I've done my job? Or do you really get a sense that you're making your colleagues uncomfortable if you dissent? I just want to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. In Ndaba in particular, I felt strong about it, and I wrote separately. After I had distributed my judgment, the panel was headed by the president of the court. He came to me and commended me on my judgment and said, well, it's a well-written judgment, but I'm never going to agree with you. But I had no sense that I had created animosity among my colleagues.
But should it matter? If you believe that you're doing the right thing, should the attitudes of others matter?
It shouldn't matter, Chief Justice. Yes, thanks.
Commissioner Singh?
Thank you very much. One is a query and the other is a question. On page 12, good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Were to have been delivered on the 18th of December. Have they since been delivered?
They have been delivered, yes, thank you.
Thank you. And then there's another document we have here with the GCB heading. And there's an annexure list of judgments considered. I don't know if you've seen that. If I count the number of judgments that you've considered, it's about 35, reported and unreported.
Yes.
Would that be correct?
It is not correct, Commissioner C. I have provided the Commission with a list of my reported judgments from pages 192 to 204. I have a list of about 225, those that are reported online and in your traditional law reports.
Yeah, because 35 were listed here, and you know, I was wondering, Chief Justice, that of the 35, if it was 35, 10 were overturned on appeal, and that doesn't look very good as a ratio. Now, can you just pick up one of those judgments that were overturned on appeal and give us a sense of why you think any one of them, the more important one, was overturned on appeal?
Maybe one can look at the Bengwenyama matter. The two Bengwenyama matters, they were had together. In one of the matters, of the Bengwenyama matter, I did not feel strong enough to make a substitution for the minister. But the Supreme Court of Appeal went further, set aside the minister's determination, and made a substitution. So in other words, they substituted the order of the minister with the court's own order. I did not feel confident enough at that stage with what was before me to make that determination.
Thank you. Just to clarify again, so the information given to us through you, Chief Justice, by the GCB of the list of judgments considered is certainly not only 35, reported and unreported.
I have written over 400 judgments. As I said, 225 of them, I've listed them there. 19 of them have been reported in the law reports.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Commissioner Mpofu?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Judge Makgoka.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Mpofu.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you a difficult question which you are at liberty not to answer because it might have, it's quite a personal question. I'm aware that after the application was made, you sadly lost your wife. And what I really wanted to know about that, and you can just answer it as a yes or no question. By the way, please accept our condolences. Has those family circumstances, will they have any effect in if your application becomes successful in terms of arrangements with the children and so on?
Thanks, Commissioner Mpofu. Should I be recommended and appointed, it should not have any difficulty for my children. My children are fortunately not young anymore. My daughter is 31. She's a qualified chartered accountant. My son is 21. He's in his final year of LLB. So it won't change much.
Thank you very much. The next question has to do with your just where you come from. You know, I don't believe that people come into this job without bringing their history and culture and all those things. Now, I know you as a deeply religious person, but also somebody who has spent maybe about 20 years as a member of the Black Consciousness Movement, Nazapo. How will those experiences or life experiences assist you in dealing with some of the complex questions that we're talking about here, about gender, racial transformation, and so on? Have you found that that background assists you in dealing with those complexities?
I think you're quite correct, Commissioner Mpofu. My background in the Black Consciousness Movement has assisted me to be firm, especially on matters of race, to make sure that nobody can undermine me because I am black. So that has assisted me a lot, yes. Thanks.
Commissioner Malema?
Thank you, CJ.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Mpofu.
No, thanks very much. Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Malema.
I just wanted to check one thing. If you are appointed to the Supreme Court of Appeal, will that be against the intention of transformation? Will it work against transformation, your appointment to the Supreme Court of Appeal?
Definitely not. I think it will enhance it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nyambi?
Thanks, CJ. Afternoon, Judge Makgoka.
Good afternoon.
I've got just one question. The Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court have on various occasions confirmed your judgment. So, what, in your view, are the hallmarks of a well-thought and good judgment?
Well, I think a good judgment is one that conveys the footprints of the judge in a manner that is understandable, firstly to the litigants and to the public.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner Nyambi. Commissioner Nkosi Thomas?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Justice Makgoka.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Thomas.
Condolences yet again from us as members of the JSC.
Thank
I
you.
must disclose that you and I went to university together. So good to see you.
I think
And,
high school and varsity.
And yes, and I've had the pleasure of appearing before you in the SCA.
Yes.
Very well. I just want to put to you a comment that was made by the GCB,
Yes.
and that relates to the judgment that you penned in the matter rent water versus vague vet. They say there, I don't know if you've had the opportunity of
I've
reading what has
definitely.
been said, but they criticize the quality of your judgment, suggesting that the ratio is somewhat inconsistent and it yielded therefore a problematic judgment. Do you have any comments that you wish to make on that?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know the source of that comment.
Well,
Because-
if I may assist quickly, the GCB, the General Counsel of the Bar, they tend to make their comments known to the Commission before the
And
interviews.
I've seen that comment, but what I'm saying is I do not know who the source of the comment is. It could well be a losing litigant in that matter. That judgment has not been taken on appeal yet. If it is taken on appeal and it is overturned, I would accept the criticism. I also note that an academic has also criticized the judgment, But the same academic, Professor Sonekas, has on occasion criticized the judgments of the Supreme Court of Appeal. So perhaps maybe let's wait until the judgment goes on appeal. Let's hear what the appeal court says.
Very well. Thank you very much, Justice. Thanks, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Nkosi Thomas. Justice Makgoka, you're excused. I'm sure my condolences were conveyed to you by the JP.
Yes, they were. Thanks.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. You're
Thank you.
excused. Sir.